What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, your host of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, coming to you live on Spreaker.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and obviously the headline of the show today. I hate to start the show off on and talk about a somber topic. Most of the time, I preach positivity and try to put a positive spin on things, but I felt as if it was necessary to talk about a topic in the sport of mixed martial arts that happened this past week. The head jiu-jitsu coach for Extreme Couture, a guy that spent a lot of time training the likes of Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen, Matt Lindland, Gray Maynard, Misha Tate, just to name a few names there. Robert Follis lost his life this past week, passed on, this past week, and it's very tough to hear that news because being a huge mixed martial arts fan and taking in the sport for what it is today and seeing these guys like Randy Couture and that era moving on to this era, seeing Robert Follis on plenty of specials inside of the world of grappling in terms of flow grappling. Working with Kevin Lee in his interim title fight with Tony Ferguson, working with TJ Dillashaw for his fight with Cody Garbrandt. This guy was in all eras of MMA, whether it's the prehistoric barbaric era or the Couture Liddell era, and now the era, the era known, as MMA as it is today. Robert Follis, I think this loss in terms of the mixed martial arts community is one that is definitely felt because I've followed his career as a coach just in terms of what he brings to the table with the names that I've dropped. Some of the names of those guys are and gal, I could say, in the case of Misha Tate, are some of my favorite fighters. So Robert Follis was a guy that I watched a lot of his coaching, watched a lot of his training videos and stuff like that on YouTube and things like that were posted so often. And he just seemed like a guy that really cared about his pupil, his student, where the athlete sometimes is selfish, the coach is selfless, and Robert Follis was one of those guys. Just seeing the outpouring of support for the man, it was obvious that he touched a lot of lives and did a lot of good things for the sport we know as mixed martial arts today. I listen to Ariel Helwani's show every Monday, the MMA Hour, and I'm a huge fan of Ariel Helwani. Got to meet him personally in Buffalo at UFC 210. And, I was actually at the 716 where I got to talk with him, and just seeing him interview Randy Couture and seeing how Randy Couture, who's the toughest SOB that there's ever been and probably will be in the sport of mixed martial arts, he had a tough time talking about Robert Follis and talking about what he meant to him and what he did for his career. And it's pretty crazy. It really made me think, coaches have such a huge impact on the lives of so many people. And it was really special to see, it was sad, but special to see that Robert Follis had that much of an impact on his pupils and on his students. And he still had so much to give to the sport. Such a shame that the details of his passing were that of a suicide. I hate to think. Well, some people have this thought process where if it's a suicide, it was obviously a self-inflicted death, unfortunately, and most people, not most, but some people think that, a suicide kind of takes away the value of the person, where I see it as it's pretty sad and depressing that a person that caused so much joy in the lives of others did not feel the joy in his own heart to, wake up and live another day. That's a sad instance rather than one that we should scoff at and say, that it's not as sad. We really need to preach a message to people that, we do care about them. We do feel as if they're worthy of being here, and they have a purpose. And a guy that had such a huge purpose in the lives of others felt as if he didn't. And that is a very, very sad concept to grasp. Somebody that coached so many athletes, a guy that thought that he was on top of the world. I mean, we haven't really had the opportunity to really understand what Robert Follis meant to the MMA community, his legacy as a coach. In my estimations, in terms of my fandom inside the sport of mixed martial arts and the UFC and everything that's come along with it, the WEC, Pride, Bellator, Strikeforce, Robert Follis was one of the only coaches, I'm pretty sure, and if I really go back and look at it, I could be wrong, but at one point he had a champion in every organization, whether that be the UFC or Strikeforce or Pride. Robert Follis was a guy that really was successful. I mean, Randy Couture was the UFC light heavyweight champ. Nate Corey was a contender in the UFC middleweight division. He got a title shot. He's either led fighters to title shots or they have actually won titles. Matt Lindland was a guy that was one of the best grapplers in the world. Chael Sonnen, obviously, and obviously Dan Henderson. So Robert Follis, in his own right, was one hell of a coach. And we talk about NFL coaches like Belichick and Noel and Lombardi, and they're so revered because the sport has been around for so long. But with MMA, it's still so new that we've only scratched the surface of true coaching talent. And guys like Greg Jackson, guys like Robert Follis, guys like Dwayne Ludwig, guys like Uriah Faber even, along the way. And there's so many more, obviously you have the Gracie family and things like that, but there's so many more coaches along the way that have paved the way. Trevor Whitman is a coach that has been very successful. He's finally getting the credit that he deserves. Robert Follis was one of those guys. It's really a shame that, this is the situation. I saw a tweet or a Instagram post from someone that I think was his greatest accomplishment inside his coaching tenure, and that was Miesha Tate. She won the title off of Holly Holm in thrilling, emphatic fashion, and Robert Follis was the guy that, was her main jiu-jitsu coach, and she finished that fight via submission versus Holly Holm back at UFC 196, which was one of the more memorable cards in UFC history, where Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor. So Robert Follis is really built into the DNA of this sport, dating back to the early 90s and dating up until now. So it's a real shame. A guy that seemed like he had it all. He seemed like he was a joyful person, but his demons unfortunately caught up to him. And I hate to say that because it's such a it diminishes. I feel like in some ways people diminish the value of a person based on whether they die of natural causes or die of their own hand. For someone to come to that decision and make that decision, it's very sad. It's very sad. So, remembering Robert Follis today in this first part of the Thomas Take Sports podcast, and I hate to, start the show off on a somber note, but, I really went back and I looked at the accomplishments of Robert Follis, of what he has done in his MMA career, and I was just blown away by how impactful this guy has been on the sport, on the athletes, and in terms of training, quality training. He's a guy that has really championed a lot of concepts that are used, used today. So, Miesha Tate posted that post featuring her and Follis hugging after her title win versus Holly Holm, and Miesha's face is all bruised, but Robert Follis just looks so happy in that moment, so happy that he was able to help Miesha accomplish something that long eluded her in her career. She had the fights with Ronda Rousey. She came up short twice in Strikeforce and once in the UFC. She had some speed bumps versus Kat Zingano, and then she rallied back, got another title shot versus Holly Holm, and most considered Holly Holm to be unbeatable at that point, being that she had just beaten the unbeatable in Ronda Rousey, and Robert Follis led her to that victory. So, his impact on the sport will be felt forever. Those moments will stand the test of time. And it's very unfortunate that we have instances like this that pop up in sports. Guys like Robert Follis, guys like Junior Seau, guys like Dave Dearson, and those are completely different circumstances, but in the end, they're the same. Someone taking their life via suicide, and it's very tough to grasp that. But Suicide Awareness Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. If one friend just sends this number, 1-800-273-8255, post it on Facebook, demonstrate that someone is always listening, someone cares. If you call that number, they will lend their time to you and make a difference in carrying on rather than making that choice. It's a choice that has affected so many lives. I mean, you talk about, when I first heard that Robert Follis passed, the way that he did, my first initial thought was, I really hope he doesn't have children, because that's something that affects their lives day in and day out, daily from that moment on. I'm not sure if he does, but if he does, my thoughts and prayers go out to his family and anyone that was affected by this. It's definitely a tragedy, to say the least. A guy that had so much left. He was building a facility, his own gym, working with rising stars like Kevin Lee. And it's got to be a devastating loss for the people that have been coached by him and that had an impact on his life, or that he had an impact on their lives. So, once again, Suicide Awareness Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. Just one person, share this. It could save lives, and that is what is most important. At the end of the day, this sports stuff is fun to talk about. This sports stuff, whether it's predictions or post-fight reactions or Bill's post-game shows, I love it, but this is what really counts. The lives of others is what really counts, and having a lasting impact and helping someone make the decision to not choose that path is worth it all to me. So take care, everybody. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, Part 1 of today's show. We'll be right back.